Interpersonal communication is the process at work during an exchange of words between two or more people. Its simplest and most common form is dialogue. At first glance, this process seems simple, even simplistic, and generally we all have a general feeling of knowing it well. We can tell ourselves that there's nothing too complicated about it. But on closer inspection, it always gives rise to a few particular phenomena and mechanisms that we will now examine. We will present this through a simple example featuring Alan and Basil, two characters standing face to face, conversing on some topic. Here, Alan will start the dialogue, and Basil will respond. What is happening? Well, apparently, Alan says what he has to say. Meanwhile, Basil listens to him. Then, when Alan has finished speaking, Basil takes the floor to say what he needs to say in reaction to Alan's words. And so on until the end of the dialogue. There you go, finished, everything's been said. But in that case, how to explain that there can exist what we call misunderstandings and misinterpretations? And how, as always in such cases, to explain that we sometimes have an unfortunate tendency to blame the other person, in a way. Come on, I can see it clearly, you seem to say this. Not at all, you are distorting my words. To see more clearly, we are going to isolate a sequence of the dialogue between Alan and Basil. We will choose the one at the very beginning of their conversation, where Alan starts talking while Basil listens to him. So let's examine this short sequence in slow motion, so to speak, to better analyze it. We will see that for Alan to speak and Basil to listen. This implies a number of things. Firstly, Alan delivers the message. Just before speaking, let's observe that most often, outside of phenomena of the type speaking for the sake of speaking, Alan should have an intention. Alan's intention here is simply what he has in mind, and that will push him to speak. But outside of extreme cases, it is, all things considered, quite rare for an intention to lead directly to speech. Indeed, our representation of the world, and therefore our thoughts, most often pass through a certain number of filters. Alan's message will therefore have to pass through these filters. But what exactly do these filters consist of? Actually, we usually count at least 3 categories. First, there are the sensory and neurological filters. These depend on our nervous system, as well as the functioning of our sense organs. Everything that influences how we perceive and consider the world around us. For example, let's imagine that Alan has sharp eyesight that allows him to glimpse a detail in the surrounding landscape that apparently escaped Basil. Or suppose that Alan has a hearing impairment that made him misunderstand a sentence he just heard on the radio. Then there are the socio-cultural filters. The culture of our social group contributes greatly to shaping and even distorting our worldview. For example, if Alan simply intends to greet his interlocutor, this will take very different forms, depending on whether the scene takes place in Japan, in the United States, in France, or in Greenland. And finally, we can mention the personal filters. They have been brought to us by our upbringing, the influence of parental figures, and also our life experiences. They influence our way of considering our place in the world, as well as that of others. To take another example, imagine that Alan has always heard from his family that it is appropriate to address one's interlocutors in an even voice, imbued with the deepest humility, whatever our intentions, and that he is very influenced by this. Once the intention has passed through Alan's filters, and this, without him being aware of it himself most of the time, Alan will indeed start to talk. This phase is called the sending, the act of sending a message. Secondly, Basil receives the message. We now come to the so-called reception phase, the one in which Basil will receive the message. First of all, in order for Basil to hear, this presupposes the absence of interference. In communication, we call this noise. When noise occurs, it obviously hinders proper reception of the message. It should be noted that in communication, noise is understood to mean anything that can hinder the proper deciphering of the message. For example, if an ambulance were to pass by. I was just saying, if an ambulance were to pass by, with its sirens blaring during the delivery of the message, well, we would call that noise, of course. But curiously, here, the term noise will also encompass anything that can obstruct, including the appearance of a disturbing or even distracting element in Basil's field of vision. And not only of vision. A burning smell, for example, may make him fear a fire, to the point that Basil won't even be able to perceive the message. Let's now suppose an absence of noise, and see what happens next. Well, the message reaches Basil's ears. That's the reception itself. Note that it is the sending and reception together that constitute what is commonly called the message. In the same way that Alan had, remember, his own filters which intervened just before the delivery of the message, Basil has his own reception filters. These intervene immediately after the reception itself and can be distributed in exactly the same categories as the sending filters. Remember, these are the sensory, socio-cultural and personal filters. Finally, once the filters have been passed, the message, which, let's remember, had been triggered by an intention in Alan's mind, produces in Basil's mind what we call an effect. Phew, that's all, you might be thinking. Well, actually, not quite. If we want to be complete in our description, it is necessary to add at least 3 other factors. The first of these factors is called feedback. In its literal meaning, this word means to be fed in return. This refers to all manifestations, particularly visual or auditory, that an interlocutor may produce, even discreetly, during the delivery of a message. This may consist of short onomatopoeia, expressions of astonishment, surprise, anger, sympathy, or whatever else. These manifestations are very precious to the sender of the message, who can, if wished, strive to verify that the message has been well understood. In a way, I have the impression that what I just said provokes a reaction in you. Am I wrong? The second of these factors is simply the context in which this exchange takes place. Are we indoors? At someone's house? At Alan's house, perhaps? Unless it's at Basil's, or at a mutual friend's, or at their workplace. In a hospital room? A public place? In a car? Are they alone? Or in the presence of witnesses? It is easy to understand that all these elements can change, modify, or even bias things. Third factor, the channel. The channel is what the message passes through. In the example we just saw, the message is produced by Alan's vocal cords, then carried by the vibrations of the air, finally landing in Basil's ear. But as we know, it is possible to communicate differently, by mail, telephone, teleconference, and so on. There too, it is easy to understand that the channel used can also influence the course of events, and this at all levels, throughout all stages of our communication. That's it. In a few seconds, the sequence will resume. It will be Basil's turn to speak, and Alan's turn to listen, and so on until the end of the exchange. I hope it is now clearer for you that between the intention of a speaker, A, and the effect produced on a listener, B, there are at least 10 chances that the arrow will miss its target. What can make it deviate? Well, let's say a certain number of air currents caused by one or more sending filters, the sending itself, a noise, or more broadly any type of interference coming unexpectedly to disrupt or mask the message, the reception itself, and one or more reception filters. The writer Bernard Werber has very well described this state of affairs with the following aphorism: between what I think, what I mean, what I think I'm saying, what I say, what you want to hear, what you think you hear, what you hear, what you wish to understand, what you think you understand, and what you understand, there are 10 possibilities that we have difficulties communicating. But let's try anyway.